Good morning. On behalf of the Alliance of Women in Workers' Compensation, we would like to welcome you to today's webinar. Today's webinar is entitled Collaborate Better Together in a Digital Age. This is a keynote that was recorded during 2023's National Work Comp Conference and is being broadcast today, March 7th, 2024. Before we get started, I would like to thank this year's corporate sponsors for their support on hosting events such as this. They support us not because they want their logos up on a screen, but they support the cause, which is to affect positive change in the workers' compensation industry through networking, supporting, mentoring, and collaboration. The Alliance is inclusive of all professionals in workers' compensation, regardless of career stage, with the belief that we can learn from and support each other. Our theme this year is Ignite Your Potential. Head to the Alliance website for all upcoming events. We are excited to be hosting webinars, collaboration sessions, and in-person events throughout the year as we provide you with resources and speakers to help you ignite your potential. Be sure to check back on our website for registration details, and if you can't make an event, don't worry. We record all events and make available on our website. The Alliance has grown so much each year, and last year was no exception. We continue to launch new chapters, so please be sure to connect with your local ambassador for all upcoming events, and be sure to check out a replay of our January 25th webinar to learn more details about the ambassador program. Change is preceded by trust. It is through acceptance and inclusion that trust will be formed and positive impact will occur. The Alliance is committed to creating a safe space in the workers' compensation industry for women of diverse backgrounds and experiences through a shared culture that integrates various perspectives. This is who we are and who we will be. The time to do better and be better is now. The Alliance understands that diversity is a journey that will take time to make meaningful change for our organization, its followers, and its supporters. We will be intentional in making progress along our key pillars of change. If you would like to learn more about the Alliance's DEI initiatives, check out a replay of our February panel discussion with the DEI committee. Turning to today's webinar, email replies that show up a week later. Video chats full of, oops, sorry, no you go, can you hear me? Ambiguous text messages. Is it any wonder that communication takes so much time and effort to figure out? How do we lose our innate capacity to understand each other? Humans rely on body language to connect and build trust, but most of our communication is happening behind a screen. Traditional body language signals are no longer visible, or are they? Join us for an invaluable keynote from the National Work Comp Conference where Dhawan, author of the new book, Digital Body Language, combines cutting-edge research and engaging storytelling to decode the new signals and cues that have replaced traditional body language across genders, generations, and cultures. In person, we lean in, uncross our arms, smile, nod, and make eye contact to show we are listening. Online, reading carefully is the new listening. Writing clearly is the new empathy. And on a phone or video call, it's worth 1,000 emails. In this keynote, Erica supercharges your teams with collectively understood rules that foster connection, build trust, and drive innovation. Erica is an internationally recognized leading authority, speaker, and advisor on 21st century teamwork, collaboration, and innovation. Named one of the top 50 management thinkers in the world by Thinkers 50, she is the author of 2 best-selling books, Get Big Things Done and Digital Body Language. Although this is a pre-recorded session, please utilize the chat feature throughout this webinar with your thoughts and to engage with your fellow members about the topic that impacts all of us and is only growing more pertinent by the day. Thank you for the time you're spending with us today, and we hope you enjoy this webinar.
Good afternoon! Woo! Isn't it great to be together? I can see you, I can feel you. There's so much good fashion in the room. There's no mute button. Thank God for that, right? In the last few years, we've all seen more disruption, yet more innovation in how we work and collaborate than the last 10 years. All of you as leaders across the workers' comp industry have had to reimagine how you connect. Digital tools that got some traction in this industry for years are now requirements, not only for productivity and collaboration, but also for social connection and celebration. And I believe the question that we must answer now as we think about truly being together towards tomorrow is no longer simply how will we adapt to our new normal, whatever new normal we're living in, but more importantly, we must ask, how how will we create a better normal? How will we use the lessons and the changes of the last few years to make sure we don't revert back to old ways of collaborating? We use these lessons to ask ourselves, what has changed? What have we learned? And what does it look like to collaborate faster and further together now? As was shared, my name is Erica Dhawan. My life's work over the last 2 decades has been helping leaders and teams reimagine how they connect intelligently in today's modern working world. I've written 2 books on this subject, as you know, and work with leaders across every industry. But when people ask me why I do what I do, I tell them it's a story that's lasted my entire life. I grew up as a shy and introverted girl in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, not too far away in the Midwest. My parents were Indian immigrants, and at home we spoke Hindi. So when I got to school, I had accented English. Raising my hand, calling attention to myself, speaking on this stage would have been unimaginable to me. But one of the ways I learned to find my voice, to connect across differences, was mastering how to decipher other people's body language. I'd watch the popular girls with their heads high, the cool kids slouching during school assemblies. It taught me what we all know in business. It's not what we say, it's how we say it. Fast forward, my challenges as a kid allowed me to become an expert at body language and communication. But in many ways, just like I was an immigrant to traditional body language as a kid, today we are all navigating being immigrants to the new world of our digital body language, the world of constant emails and Zooms and hybrid meetings. Now, if there's one thing I've learned about true human connection, it does not start with one more meeting or email. It starts by doing something fun. It starts by creating a new shared experience. And it starts by connecting not only our minds, but our bodies. Who here has heard of Bollywood dance? Anyone in the room? So, as a shy kid, Bollywood dance was my way to connect with others. It allowed me to not feel awkward, even though we were different. And basically, Bollywood dance is 2 moves. It's change the light bulb, wash the sheets. That's right. Change the light bulb, wash the sheets. So I asked myself, how can we kick off today in a new and different way? In a way that we've never done before and bring a whole new level to all of you as leaders in this room. I'd like everyone to stand up right now and join me for a 1-minute Bollywood dance. Here we're gonna go. Change your light bulb first. Change your light bulb. Wash your sheets. You got it. Change your light bulb. Wash your sheets. Shouldn't we start every meeting that way? Yes. That's together towards tomorrow. We shake things up. Great start to the day. Now, the reality is, we'll get the slides back up. The reality is that sometimes connection doesn't feel that way. Let me start with a true story between 2 colleagues, Sarah and John. In the white box is an email exchange between Sarah and her manager, John. In the black box is what they actually meant by their email exchanges. One Wednesday afternoon, Sarah has an idea for a deliverable she's working on for John. She shoots off an email in the white box saying, quick thought, what do you think of this idea for the deliverable? What she really meant was in the black box. I have a vague, great idea. It's not thought through yet. I want to get your thoughts before I spend more time on it. At about 8 p.m. that night, after a long day of meetings, John got the note and he was confused. He thought the deliverable was done. He wasn't sure why Sarah was sending the message now. He writes, how would this fit in? Question mark. What he really meant was, Sarah, I need more context. You're closer to the work than I am. I was about to send this to our business partner. Sarah reads this message late that night, and even though she's worked with John for 6 years, She can't read the tone and body language of his email. She spends 45 minutes that night crafting a 200-word email with bold and underlined headings, changing the subject line from quick thought to deliverable changes. Felt pretty good about it. John got the note and thought to himself, this is pretty great. He loved the ideas. That's what he was thinking in his mind. He responds with a one-letter K. Sarah reads this K message and thinks John is being passive-aggressive. She ruminates on it for much of that night. Finally, the next morning, she writes, does this mean I should make the changes or hold off? What she really felt was 5 exclamation points. We need a better way to connect and collaborate to get to the answer. John got the note. He skimmed the email. He didn't read it carefully. He thought they were already on the same page. He responds, not answering the question, with a one-word yes. Sarah has no idea whether to make the changes or hold off. At this point, Sarah's about to have a heart attack. John thinks everything's great. What could have been a quick 15-minute phone, video, in-person interaction turned into 5 hours of wasted time, stress, and fear over that 12-hour period. Raise your hand if you've ever experienced this before in the last year, month, week, minute, second. Take a moment to think about the impact of these daily experiences, not only on each of every one of us, but our teams. Here's a reality we're all facing today when it comes to collaboration. Research shows that 3/4 of our face-to-face collaboration is built on nonverbal body language. Pacing, pauses, gestures, tone, the lean in a sales conversation, the firm handshake, the eye contact. This is how we built trust in business. But whether we knew it or not, and I'd argue well before the pandemic, up to 70% of our connections are now virtual or hybrid in some way. We are emailing, we are conference calling, we are digitally communicating with our colleagues on the same floor in the same office. I'll never forget being on a conference call. 3 of us were remote, 3 people were in the office. It wasn't until the 26th minute of a 30-minute meeting, someone in the office says, does anyone on the phone have something to share? They had been excluded the entire time. I like to say that interacting has never been easier, but productive collaboration is harder than ever. And if you also agree that there's a reply-all epidemic, please raise your hand. I know I'm not alone. Yeah. So today's conversation is not about how do we connect more as leaders in the workers' comp industry. Today's conversation is about how do we connect intelligently. I define what I call connectional intelligence as the capability to unlock new and unrealized value by maximizing the power of our networks and our relationships. We all know what IQ is. 25 years ago, emotional intelligence came to stage as a key leadership trait. But today, more than ever, our job is no longer just to have the knowledge ourselves. It's no longer just to be able to read body language or emotional intelligence cues in a physical room. Each and every one of us must be able to connect with people across any function, across any silo, across any in-person or digital channel. And more than ever, especially in this industry where there's so much work across silos, more than ever, we have to remember how important connectional intelligence is, to truly collaborate across different silos, to truly remember that our role is not just within our own team, it's to really be a super connector across our organizations. So what I want to do today is I want to introduce you to the skill of connectional intelligence as a new way to think about what it looks like to truly collaborate faster and further together. And in order to do that, I also really want to talk about the changes we've all seen in the last few years. Because when it comes to the way we connect, we don't just have a traditional body language, we have a whole new set of cues and signals that have replaced the handshake, the head nod, the lean in, that make up the new connection signals in today's working world. Let me give you some examples. The choice of communication medium. Did you choose to email, call, video call? These are not trivial decisions. These are the new cues to others of complexity, urgency, priority. I know one senior leader, she was working with a younger team, and she kept leaving them voicemails and then getting angry why they wouldn't respond. And then she finally learned that a lot of young employees don't listen to voicemail. She finally just switched her approach to try to use Slack, which was the internal tool. She got instant responses. Just a simple switch made a significant difference. CC, BCC, forward reply all, I like to say these are the new measures of inclusion and exclusion. But we have to be thoughtful about this today to avoid collaboration burnout. I like to say set some norms. If you're on the to line of an email, you need to respond. If you're on the CC line, no need to respond. We don't need 15 thank yous or okays. Every subject line must answer what I need from you. The subject line is the new eye contact, right? If you want to get someone's attention, be specific and to the point. Word choice. I like to say that reading messages carefully is the new listening. Writing clearly is the new empathy. We don't just walk the talk, we don't just talk the talk, we write the talk first. The new first impression is no longer just the first 7 milliseconds someone meets you in person. It's the thoughtfulness of the first email you write, the first 3 minutes of your video call, whether you either define success up front or don't. And let me tell you, this is a huge advantage for women because we can be good at this. Response time. Did you respond in 2 minutes, 2 days, 2 weeks? People make meanings out of this, whether you like it or not. I know teams that have become much more thoughtful about this, especially to ensure their teams don't prioritize hastiness over thoughtfulness. One team, they have acronyms in their subject lines of emails. So 4H means I need this in 4 hours. 2D means I need this in 2 days. So really being able to pace what is priority versus what needs time and thoughtfulness matters today. Let me give you some more examples. Video meetings. They are very much the norm now, not the exception. We are no longer in the wild, wild west of this. We are doing it on a regular basis. It's really important to think about how are we using these tools to actually help our work versus drown us in work. I'll give you an example. I know one team leader, he's completely changed the way he runs his video call meetings because of what he's learned in the last few years about collaboration. He always sends a clear agenda with questions he wants his team to be ready to answer at the beginning of the meeting 2 days before the meeting, so as everyone has time to think about it. Then at the beginning of the meeting, he has everyone share their answers to those questions in the chat tool or if they're in person on a whiteboard first, and then he calls on those with the most different or unique ideas. He told me he has heard more from his introverts and his junior colleagues using this format in a way that he had never heard from them in the traditional office. First of all, just that thoughtful agenda beforehand allowed introverts to have time to think, to be ready to share versus having to fight for airtime over gregarious extroverts. Second, by getting everyone to write their ideas first, it allowed junior team members to feel like their ideas mattered just as much as senior team members. Research shows that the first 3 people that speak in any meeting, in-person, virtual, hybrid, tend to be the 3 most senior people, and they tend to take up 80% of the airtime. Think about the amount of groupthink that has always existed. So it completely changed the way he was able to engage his team. That's the power of what we can do with these tools to collaborate better. Punctuation, this is a fun one. Did you know there was an academic study that showed if you put a period at the end of a text, digital natives that tend to skew younger think that means passive aggressiveness. And digital adapters, those that skew a little older think that's just good grammar. And if you have kids, you know exactly what I mean. Meeting times, did you start on time? Did you end 5 minutes early? That's the new art of empathy and respect. Even emojis, for some it's friendly, for others it's immature. So I want you to take a moment to think about where have you struggled most when it comes to collaboration today? Where have been your greatest opportunities? What have you learned? What have you adapted to? What have you been more effective at? And how do we take these lessons to truly think about what it looks like to collaborate together towards tomorrow? In a minute, I'm going to walk you through what I call 5 key principles of connectional intelligence. that are principles that we can all implement immediately to better lead, collaborate, drive teamwork. But before I do that, I want to share a quick story of a senior female leader I worked with. Her name is Kelsey, and she got some feedback that her empathy was weak. So the first thing I did was look for all the traditional markers of subpar empathy: an inability to listen deeply, to ask questions, to use good body language. Turns out when she was in person with her team, she was great at all these things. She asked questions, she made it fun, she listened attentively. But while her traditional body language signals were great, her digital body language signals were abysmal. She was the person that would send brief, low-context emails saying, "Where is this doc?" with 5 question marks, or send an all-caps text message freaking out her junior team. She would multitask during video calls, chronically cancel video call meetings without her team knowing why or when it would be rescheduled. And she realized that in today's world of business, there was a whole new set of connection signals that either drove teamwork or didn't. And so as we think about today's world of collaboration, I'm going to walk you through now. We're going to bring back up the slides, and I'm going to walk you through what I call the 5 individual principles. As I walk you through these, take some time to think about where's your greatest opportunity to improve as a leader, and how do we continue to bring better rituals to our teams? The first principle is to choose clarity over brevity. Now, as we all know, the pressure to communicate quickly, especially in this industry, is more important than ever. But we have to remember not to simply take shortcuts, not to leave out context. We have to remember that what was implicit in traditional body language has to be explicit in our digital body language. I'll never forget a story from a leader, Adriel. She wanted to talk to a junior team member, Brian, about something, and late one night, she sent him a calendar invite for a 1-hour meeting the next morning. No agenda, no subject line details on the meeting invite. Brian thought he was about to get fired. He didn't sleep all night, ruminated about this. At the end of the meeting, he admitted what he thought the meeting was about, and it really taught Adriel to never confuse a brief message with a clear message. That even just, it could stay brief, but even just taking the time to add a little context or clarity made a significant difference. I mean, I've seen leaders do things where instead of just sending the meeting invite, they'll write quick chat - good thing. And just the good thing simply allows their team to be ready and to want to engage. I know another leader, she was reviewing some slides from her team on a video call. She said something of the likes of, "Let's iterate on this a bit more." What she really meant was, let's add 2 more bullet points on this slide. But she was brief, she wasn't clear. The team spent 40 hours on 10 new slides. Think about how demotivated they felt when it turned into 2 bullet points. Let me move now from the first principle to the second principle. Have a communicate your mind mindset. Now, as I mentioned before, today as leaders, we have to make what was implicit explicit. In all of our communications, I like to say in person and hybrid or digitally, we have to make sure we're always answering these key questions. What is the ask? What is the priority level? Why do you and others need this? And how are you feeling about it? Are you grateful? Are you happy? Did you share that? Think about it. If a colleague stayed up all night working on a deliverable for you, in the office, they used to see the smile on your face the next day. Now they get an email that says K period or THX. They don't feel valued visibly. I'd argue that one of the reasons there was a great resignation is because we didn't know how to have a great recognition of our colleagues in a world that was remote and hybrid. I'll give you another example of this. There's 4 different OKs on this slide, and yes, they mean different things often. The first OK, in all caps with an exclamation point, for some, that feels like excitement. For others, it feels like urgency. And for others, it's just a freak out moment. It's like a lash out in some way. The second OK with a period, again, in a text message. For some, that's just good grammar, and for others, it feels harsh, and that skews across generations. The third OK with multiple question marks. For some, this feels accusatory. For others, it could be friendly. And the last one, the K with an emoji. For some, this is friendly. For others, it's immature. So of course, right now, we have to know our audience, but also make sure we're understanding the cues. I'll talk a little bit about how we adapt to a lot of the digital communication norms that are changing across generations. Let me move now to the third principle. Hold your horses. Now, what do I mean here? I mean that less haste equals more speed. I'll say that again. Less haste equals more speed. You don't want to be the type of leader that just rewards the fastest person who responds to every email, the quickest person that jumps in on every video call or in-person meeting. How do you prioritize that thoughtfulness over hastiness? I'll give you an example. I know one leader, she's based in New York. She has colleagues in London, Buenos Aires, and Sydney, Australia. She found that her colleague in Buenos Aires was not engaging often on video calls. At first she thought, he must be multitasking. Then she thought, maybe he's not interested. Finally, she said, I should stop assuming, check my bias, and just ask. She sent him a quick IM, and he finally wrote back, I'm having such a hard time translating 3 different English accents when English is not my native language. The American accent, then the British accent, then the Australian accent at the exact same time. This allowed her to check her bias, and they started to make changes because she held her horses. They added closed captioning on all their video calls. When they posed a question, they invited people to share in the chat first versus jumping in. They recorded calls when appropriate. These simple connection differences not only helped that one team member, but they changed the engagement of the entire global team. So what does it look like today to truly hold our horses, to not just resume what everyone's doing, but to think differently about what it could look like? I even know one leader, she was struggling with her team not turning on their cameras on video calls. And so she realized that to be a great video call host, she had to think like a TV show host, not an office host. You know, the TV show hosts have always had to connect on a screen. And she's much clearer than she ever was in the past. She always writes in the meeting calendar invite, you know, video on mandatory or video on first 10 minutes, because she wants to make sure people build chemistry with one another. Or if she is a few people not on video for whatever reason, she says, you know, I'm going to call on those not on video first to remove my bias. Simply, they turn on their video quickly, but it's a great way to show that these simple things really matter, not just to revert or adapt to what people are doing, but to think about what will allow us to collaborate faster and further together. Additionally, we've all been through the level of anxiety we feel in the world of constant email, and also when there's slow response times to messages. You know, I like to call this curve the anxiety level to response time curve in digital messages. First, if someone doesn't respond to us, we start to wonder what's going on. Then we might get a little angry. Then we read into it for clues. Finally, we assume they forget and follow up. It's really important to give others the benefit of the doubt right now. They're getting hundreds of messages. People have different communication styles. But it's upon us to really check in on norms that make a difference or what to adjust. You know, I like to say picking up the phone is worth 1,000 emails. You know, other things make a simple difference. Change the subject line. You know, be thoughtful about upfront talking about response time expectations so you're not in this endless loop later. Let me move now to the fourth principle, assume the best intent. Now, we all know this is a common principle, but it's more important than ever today. We've all gotten messages like Tom's, like Greg's, like Jenny's, and sometimes we don't always give them the benefit of the doubt. More than ever, we have to remember to assume that a positive intent, to check if our interpretation was correct before engaging. Last but not least, I want to move to the fifth principle, find your voice. Now, I think one of the most exciting things we've seen in the last few years is all the new ways people of all walks of life and background have been able to share their voice, oftentimes in ways that they never were able to in the traditional office. I know introverts that have said to me, I feel like I finally have a voice on Zoom. I don't have to talk over loud people or those with the deepest voices. I can share my idea in the chat and people listen. I'm really not judged based on how I look or how I'm seen, but the quality of my ideas. I've heard from others that have said the way that we're able to include those in different locations. Simple things like instead of having the conference call, having a hybrid meeting where we have a live host, we have a remote host. We have the remote host lead the first half of the hybrid meeting to remove that traditional proximity bias, made a significant difference in the group discussion. I know another leader, he completely flipped the way he runs his town halls now. Instead of bringing all of his employees together, speaking on stage for an hour, taking 10 minutes of questions, he's flipped the model. Now what he does is he sends a video recording of his business update 1 week before the meeting, and he asks all of his employees to watch it. And then when they're in the physical meeting, it's a group discussion where all the team members are sharing ideas with him. He said, I never want to go back to the old school traditional lecture. When we are physically together, we have to make it matter and maximize the connectional intelligence of everyone's voice. So what does that look like for us as leaders across the workers' comp industry? It requires us to remember that there are new ways of driving that collaboration. Simple things for introverts like making sure there's open lines outside of just one meeting. Remember, if you have 30 people in a meeting where only 6 people talk, simple things can make a big difference, just sharing at the end. If you have an idea that you haven't shared, send me a one-on-one email by Friday. Or having everyone get into small groups of 3 and answer one question, what hasn't been discussed that should? That can make a significant difference. Other things, those thoughtful agendas, calling on people to speak that you normally wouldn't hear from first, cutting people off that go too long, think like that TV show host, creating downtime for people to think about their own unique individual ideas versus jumping on top of what a senior leader said. Extroverts need airtime, so we have to manage it. I'm a big fan of those breakout rooms, the thoughtfulness of meeting moderators. We're becoming better at this, and it really matters. Another key factor when it comes to finding our voice is the fact that we don't just have different traditional styles, we have different digital body language styles as well. On one end, there are those I call the digital natives, and on the other end, there are those I call the digital adapters. A digital native is someone who's really thriving in this virtual first world. They love text, they love IM, they hate voicemail, they hate phone calls out of the blue. They prefer frequent, short, fast messages. On the other end of the spectrum are digital adapters, much more reluctance to new technology, prefer in person, have more of an inconsistent use of each channel. I like to say I'm a digital native and my father is a digital adapter. When he sends me a text message, it starts with, Dear Erica, it ends with love dad, and I have to scroll through it because it's as long as a handwritten letter. Haven't quite taught him that a text is not the same as a letter, but it's just an example to show that we're not all the same. And a big part of great collaboration today is not just adhering to one style or the other, but making sure that you have rituals based on the task at hand. So if you have a discussion with your team, make sure you're talking about 3 factors around collaboration. The first is complexity. When issues are complex, how do we handle them? Maybe you have norms. We have a meeting, but we keep it to 20, not 30 minutes. We always have an agenda. We do simple things like we're thoughtful about who should be there, who isn't here, when a proxy can attend versus a person that we're waiting 3 weeks on to join in on a meeting. When it's not complex, we keep it to a quick email. Second factor is urgency. Do you need it in 5 hours or 5 days? Having norms around this, even explicitly 5D, 5H matters. And lastly, frequency. How often are we communicating in these tools? What's happened recently is we're over-communicating in certain tools, email, chat tools, and then we have no time to work across those silos as well. I know leaders that have done simple things around this. One, she started hybrid office hours, where every week, 3 times a week, it was 20-minute blocks. Her team, everyone knew that she was available. She'd join a Teams call, but she would also be in her office, and they could drop in, ask a question, solve a problem in 5 minutes. It reduced so many of those long reply-all chains that we're just inefficient. So what does it look like for you to truly think about how do we adapt across these styles? First, acknowledge these differences, but not get lost in them, actually create rituals around collaboration. Now that I've talked about the 5 individual principles, I want to move now to talk about the team level. All of you as leaders work across your organization, work across organizations here in this room, and more than ever, we all know collaboration is an essential part of being in this industry. So what I want to do now is I want to share the 4 team laws of collaboration that I've seen over the last 15 years have allowed certain teams to drive exponential impact, efficiency, value, versus others not. And as I walk through these 4 laws, I want you to assess your own team. As a leader, where is your greatest opportunity to help your team improve? The first law is to value visibly. Now, again, as I've already shared in the past, valuing visibly for so many of us was built on our in-person interactions, body language, pacing, pauses, gestures, tone, the lean in, the sales conversation, the quick encounter, the water cooler. We all know those things still matter. They actually matter a lot. We have to make them better than in the past. But we all know today that valuing visibly when it comes to collaborating faster and further together is no longer just about these traditional cues. Valuing visibly is about valuing people's time, inboxes, and schedules. It's about acknowledging those individual differences in a very different way. Introvert, extrovert, adapter, native, cues that matter in person versus in a hybrid or virtual environment. And it's also about practicing radical recognition, never forgetting to show gratitude, and understanding that a digital native may see radical recognition in a very different way than a digital adapter. They may prefer a quick response time, a quick thank you so much versus a digital adapter that really wants to be able to connect with you in person, say on a monthly basis. The second key law of collaboration today is to communicate carefully. Now, I'll sum this up with one more story. I'll never forget sending a message to a colleague saying, do you want to speak Wednesday or Thursday? High priority meeting. The response, yes. As I shared earlier, reading messages carefully is the new listening. Writing clearly is the new empathy. So as leaders today, we don't just think before we speak, we have to think before we type. We have to remember that our brand is really built on our ability to deliver with maniacal clarity today. You know, I like to say it's not the big fish that eats the small fish, it's the clear fish that beats the unclear fish. Really being clear makes a huge difference. And we also have to choose the right channel. We have so many more tools and technologies, but what's important is we have to ensure that if we're adding a new tool to how we work, we discuss, does this replace an old tool or is this solving a new problem? I know teams that have come together, they've launched Microsoft Teams and they've used channels to discuss things, but they've set up norms. If we're talking in this channel, we no longer email about these 5 things. Otherwise, people are constantly flipping from different places and it's creating a lot of confusion. So as I mentioned earlier, what are some of those norms that matter for you that are critical? In all of our emails, clarifying the ask, the priority level, who needs to be involved. On the to line, clarifying who needs to respond. CC line, who doesn't need to respond. Having subject lines that answer what I need from you. And also really having very clear collaboration norms across all of the different technologies that we use today. I mentioned this earlier, but I'll highlight it again. There are 3 factors we have to clarify with our team. The first is complexity. So again, if you have those meetings, have clear norms around them. If you want people on video, let them know beforehand. Put it in the meeting invite. Remember that even your video background is a bit of your executive presence today. So if you haven't bought a ring light and a webcam, it matters. It's the new executive presence. Simple things like if it's urgent, have some norms with your team around which channels to use and which channels you won't use. I know teams that have even set up acronyms. So NNTR means no need to respond. Saved a lot of time. Another one was ROM, which meant respond on Monday, especially if I sent you something on a Friday or Saturday and didn't want to ruin someone's weekend and actually wanted you to think versus rushing a message. Let me move now from the second law to the third team law of collaboration, to collaborate confidently. Now, I hope if there's one thing you're taking away, it's that I believe collaboration is not about more meetings and emails. It's about thinking differently about how do we connect intelligently with all of our team members across our organization, across all silos and stakeholder groups. One of my favorite examples of this is an organization that was dealing with a lot of burnout, a lot of fatigue, turnover, and they realized they needed to change things up. You know, they didn't Bollywood dance, they did something else. They decided to create an initiative called Cut the Crap Committees. Yes, that's what it was called, Cut the Crap Committees. And it allowed anyone in the organization to share a process or procedure that was inefficient, and you couldn't complain about it. You had to come up with a better rule or process. So hundreds of ideas were shared. Many of them got implemented, things like budget approval processes or how meetings were run. But there was one unique cohort that had some of the best ideas, and they were ideas that were rarely shared in the past. It was admin assistants. No one had ever invited them to a collaboration meeting, and they had seen all the breakdowns of every team. Today, the admin assistants at this organization run the Cut the Crap committees. Every month, they collect ideas from their own teams. They have a virtual Teams channel, and they work together to bring it to C-suite. That's what collaboration looks like today. It's thinking beyond just our traditional ways of connecting and asking ourselves, what other problems can we solve? Again, the Alliance is a great example of connectional intelligence, bringing all of you together to continue to think bigger about this, our industry, to rise the next generation of women leaders here. So let's put this into practice. What does collaborating confidently look like? It's simple things like being much more thoughtful about how do we inform the right people at the right time? How do we broaden our questions so that we're not just limiting the answers to the same 5 people with the traditional title or the people that always speak up, but those that may have an insight that we can reach even though they're not down the hall or on our floor. Collaborating confidently is also about helping others prioritize and stay on track. Remember, everyone has hundreds of priorities now, so even just knowing how to have hierarchical priorities, here are the top 3, here are the top 5, make a significant difference. And last but not least, paying attention to the details. This is an 8-question list I use with my clients to help really focus on what great collaboration in meetings looks like today. Again, in person, virtually, hybrid, you name it. First, should it be a meeting? We have still way too many meetings that should be emails. Second, did I get everyone involved in the first 5 minutes? Research shows if you get everyone engaged in a meeting in the first 5% of a meeting, they're much more likely to participate for the remaining 95% of the meeting. Third, can I schedule it to be shorter? Right? Let's bring back the 10-minute phone call or the video call. I know leaders that have 3 of those in 30 minutes. We can do it. We have to set new norms. Did I have a thoughtful purpose, agenda? Within the first 3 minutes, did I help everyone know, here's what success looks like, here's why you're all here, here's how I want you to contribute so we hear from everyone? Did I include those remote attendees? Have a live host, have a remote host in today's world of hybrid meetings? Did I have a clear note taker summarizing all the next steps? I like to say the quick email recap after an in-person or virtual meeting is the new virtual handshake. We've all been in in-person meetings where everyone nods their heads and nothing gets done. So again, collaborating great in a really thoughtful way now is making sure we have better norms around what that looks like. And even recording meetings, if helpful. I know one team, they record all their team meetings, and when a new hire joins, they watch the last 6 team recordings. Think about how much they learn that would have taken 6 months on the job. Last but not least, when it comes to collaborating confidently, many of us are working in a hybrid world. Even if we're 5 days in the office, we're still sending the same amount of emails on the same amount of video calls as others that are working in a hybrid format. And one of the things we have to continually ask now is, what do we miss most when we're not physically in person? So based on what we share, whether it's brainstorming, apprenticeship, radical recognition, feedback sharing, those are the things we must do when we are physically in person. We don't want to be the type of leaders that have everyone back in the office and our door shut because we are busy on video calls all day long. Today, more than ever, leadership requires us to really think about what tasks are best done in person, what tasks can be done from anywhere, and how do we prioritize differently. Even flipping the model again, having teams think about their ideas, and then when they're in person, calling on people to share that you normally wouldn't hear from, having 3 or 4 social connections a week to build those connections across teams. I've seen organizations regularly set up cross-team lunches to make sure those ties are being created. Last but not least, I want to move to the 4th and final law, to trust totally. Now, once you value visibly, communicate carefully, and to collaborate competently, we all know that trust is the one thing that changes everything. But trust is hard today because it no longer is just all about eye contact or handshakes. In the world of screen freezes and echo delays and digital natives and adapters, trust requires us to give others the benefit of the doubt, to remember that to be a good leader, we have to create hybrid water cooler moments so that people can share, even if it feels forced or not natural. And we also have to show vulnerabilities in a very different way. I know one leader that's done a simple thing that has built so much trust. In his team meetings, he always asks his team to share, it's on the agenda, it's mandatory, what's one piece of bad news I normally wouldn't want to hear? He starts with good news, so they're positive first, but it was a simple act of that question that he reached out and asked, and everyone knew it was coming. It was a required answer that created a whole new level of psychological safety. He acknowledged them, he radically recognized team members, he was willing to embrace some of the conflict that came with it. I know another team that created a meeting net promoter score. This was really cool. At the end of every meeting, they rated how well the meeting was run, if it achieved its agenda, and if people's time was well used. Think about how quickly that changed the culture of the organization. So what does it look like today to build trust? It's about sparking those courageous conversations, no matter the distance, no matter the channel of engagement. What's an approach we haven't heard? If we were devil's advocate, what will we say? What's a different way of thinking about this? Who haven't we heard from? Let's start from them. Simple things make a big difference. Now that I've shared the 4 laws, I want to take a moment to get you interacting with each other. I'd like you to turn to your partners at your table. We'll give everyone about 5 to 7 minutes for this exercise, and I want you to think about which of the 4 laws resonated with you, and what's one commitment, what's one action you're taking away as you think about your own leadership, your own organization, as you think about what it looks like to collaborate faster and further together. So in a minute, we'll start. Again, what's one commitment, what's one action that's your biggest takeaway? All right. We have about 15 minutes left, and we wanted to use our time. We'll bring everyone back. Last person to speak is going to come on stage and Bollywood dance with me. All right, everyone wants to dance. Woo! All right, let's bring a few folks to share some of their insights, whether it's a takeaway, a commitment, a question, when it comes to the theme today of collaborating faster and further together. We're going to start over here with Kayla, then I think we'll move over to Nicole, and then raise your hand and we'll get a mic to you.
All right.
Share your name and your organization so we can all get to know you.
Yep. Hi, I'm Kayla McCain with ExamWorks, and a lot of excellent tips today, but I think what resonated the most with me was how to improve my collaboration with my team, and that 20-minute increments of office hours, kind of bringing you back to the office hours with your professor. But I think that's a great idea to avoid just holding on to tidbits a week or two until you meet again, or having that constant phone tag back and forth, I think that's just going to really open up the lines of communication. So thank you for that.
Fantastic. Thank you. Scheduled office hours. A lot of times your team members will be waiting 3 weeks to get on your calendar for something that's a 5-minute discussion. So think about the amount of time waste and then your time waste having a 30-minute call for a 5-minute discussion. So changing the norms around this. We'll get Nicole up, and we'll get a mic up here as well.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name's Nicole Cabariza. Pronouns are she, her, hers. I'm with Nationwide Insurance. One realization I had in our conversation was the difference between how I interact with my email when I'm reading it on my laptop versus when I'm reading it on my phone. This is Truth Time, Alliance of Women in Workers' Comp. I'm being vulnerable with you. I tend to scroll my email on my phone like I'm scrolling my Insta. And so I'm far more likely to miss key information or key points versus if I'm interacting it with on my laptop. And I think it makes me more conscientious. You know, I think about we're all here for 4 hours today. Is it really necessary to be on my email right now? I think there's an element of killing one's ego a little bit, of I'm not that important. Nationwide can allow me to be here for 4 hours and not be connected via email. So I think some important considerations I'm going to take away in terms of how I interact with my email going forward. So thank you.
Fantastic. Great. Thank you, Nicole. There's a few great insights in that one I want to highlight. And while I'm doing that, feel free to raise your hand. We'll get you a mic if you'd like to share a takeaway or question. The first is, data does show this, that when we are reading messages on our phone, we are scrolling through like websites. It's just natural to how we've been built to check online messages. So, you know, again, if you want to stand out, if you want someone to read carefully, we have to think differently about it. I mean, simple things like bottom line up front. You know, the first line has to be the bottom line of the message. Having that clear subject line, it's not a nice to have, like decision, action. If you don't have those power words, you can easily get ignored. You know, bold and underline headings, because people skim it like a website, are critical in today's world of business. So simple things make a big difference. On the other side of this, if you're getting a lot of emails from your team and you don't want them to feel like you're not being responsive, but you actually need to be thoughtful about them, respond and say, got it, I'll get back to you Tuesday, or I'll get back to you tomorrow. Star it, take some time to get to your laptop and respond in a thoughtful way. And we all know when we're rushed and we send that brief email, it can create a lot more misunderstanding than we want to if we had just taken the time and had that less haste. So thank you so much for that. Let's get a few more. Raise your hand. We have one right here, one hand raised up here. And feel free. I want to hear some folks in the back. We love you. We have someone's hand right here. We'll get to you as well. Share your name and then your takeaway or commitment.
Okay. Hi, everybody. My name is Alexis Maimonis. I'm a defense attorney out of Chicago, workers' comp primarily. That's why I'm here. But my biggest issue nowadays with all the technology is people are forgetting about the value of a phone call and how much more you can get accomplished by simply picking up the phone. And we all have cell phones, and they all have voice capability, so why aren't we using them? And I'm not saying that every issue warrants a phone call, but there are some that do. And I understand also, as Sharice with Century and I were talking, there's people communicate in different ways. They might not be as vocal as others, but get to know me. And I will relate to you on your level or how you feel comfortable, but you need to talk to me, especially when it comes to litigation. And big claims are at risk. It could kill a claim or it can make you a hero. So that's real important, is that telephone. And we all have them, so use them.
Round of applause for that. Just set a rule with your team. After 3 reply alls, pick up the phone. Just after 3 reply alls, pick up the phone. And again, say this in your new hire onboarding. And make sure to have that discussion with those new team members about these stylistic differences. It's much harder for them to pick up on these cues and the way they had done it before when they were sitting next to you all day long in the office. Let's hear from a few more.
Hey there, my name is Nerdy Nikki and I'm with MTI America. Thanks so much for all of your insights. So we were having a really great discussion at our table, and one of the things that resonated with us was communicate your mindset. It may sound ridiculous, but when you said people don't recognize the work that you're putting in. So you go through all this trouble to craft something, it takes you an hour, and your boss says, okay. I'm guilty. She's guilty. We all said we were guilty, right? And so as corny as it might sound, I remember way back in the day making a spreadsheet of the people on my team, and I would find a point to recognize them and check off that box every week. So that's just a little added bit there, but thank you.
Thank you so much. Never forget to show gratitude. Simple things. Email at the end of the week with virtual shout outs. Or, in the first 2 minutes of your team meeting, just radically recognizing team members. These things go a long way. It's just the act of doing it. Any others? Comment, takeaway, question? We have one hand right here. Last but not least, and then I'll share a few more closing remarks.
Destiny Dwyer, Cipriani and Werner from Philadelphia. Two things. With my team, I've started trying to identify what type of communicator people are. I have people who, if we're having a meeting and they know it's about staffing, they will immediately, in their head, go places that aren't on the agenda. So some of them I give information before the meeting so that they can think about it, digest it, and have a meaningful conversation at the meeting. Others, I can't do that. Yeah. Do you have any suggestions on how to do that with people that we don't maybe interact with as much, clients? And second part of that, any suggestions on how to deal with mixed communication styles? When we have an attorney that only works by email, that's the best way they communicate, and a client that wants phone calls, how do I bridge that gap?
Yeah. This is a tough one. I have an answer to it, but before I answer it, does anyone have an answer to it? How have you dealt with this? I know she's not the only one in the room. Let's use some connectional intelligence here. Anyone that has a best practice about managing mixed communication styles, client to internal? Yes, right here. We'll get you a mic.
Every letter that I write to a client, I close it with, please contact me with any questions or concerns. That could be via email or my cell phone. Here's my number. You can text me. Just get to me.
So what we heard was make yourself available across these different avenues, because in some ways we have to be the connectors of these different styles. That's very true. Anyone else? Right here. We'll get you a mic.
Sometimes I'll just go to the person and say, hey, here's what I heard. Is that what you meant me to hear?
Yeah. Love it. Simply taking that time to be explicit around here's what you heard and checking in with them, and even up front aligning, having a group discussion around these communication styles, writing it down, sending it out to them. Here's what we discussed. And then if there is reversion to old patterns, being able to go back to some type of norms structure, I think is really important. The other piece you talked about here was sometimes people don't read those agendas, they don't think about this beforehand. Sometimes you're not gonna, there's just different styles. So sometimes it's just the art of, in the first 5 minutes of this meeting, some of you have read the agenda and thought about it, and some of you haven't. I want everyone to take 5 minutes and just think about your answers here and write them down, put them in the chat, put them on the whiteboard, and then run that group discussion. So, you're forcing the design of group thoughtfulness, even if it's not going to happen naturally. I know teams that even start their meetings 5 minutes late at the 05 or 35, so it gives everyone just that break because they just haven't had a break in the day to think about something. Thank you so much. Let me move to a few final slides. The first thing I want to share is if you enjoyed today, you want to learn more about what it looks like to collaborate faster and further together. I wrote an entire book about it. It's called Digital Body Language: How to Build Trust and Connection No Matter the Distance. I'll share a bit about this. I started working on this book in 2016, well before the pandemic. This was my research well before what hit us a few years ago. And no publisher would take it. They said this is too niche, too narrow. In 2021, it was named #3 on the Wall Street Journal bestseller list and #1 best book of the year. Thank you. So, as women leaders, remember that we see things in different ways, and it's our creativity, it's our difference that is our greatest asset. And so I hope that you'll continue to remember that. And before I close, I want to share a story I don't often share, but I felt compelled to share today. This is my 4-year-old daughter, Kamaya, and when the pandemic hit, I was living in a 2-bedroom apartment with my 2 kids under 2 years old at that time, and my husband. And for much of the last few years, I have constantly felt overwhelmed, I have felt exhausted, and I always felt guilty. I felt guilty every time I was in my office, which was my bedroom at that time, heads down working. I felt guilty when I added one more video call to my calendar after 7 p.m. I felt guilty when my kids cried for their nanny more than me. And I even feel guilty now as we all adapt to planes, trains, offices, but we still have the same amount of Zoom calls and emails in our inbox. But just a few months ago, I saw my now 4-year-old daughter playing from the corner of my eye, and she has one of those plastic kids' laptops that's way more sophisticated than my first laptop. And the first thing she's doing is talking to the computer like this because she's seen me on video calls do this for the last 3 years. And then she shuts it and says, "Mommy, I'm going to work." And I realize in that moment that instead of feeling guilty all this time, I should be proud. Proud that through my example, I'm raising a confident daughter who's learning that she can find her voice, she can connect with people across any distance, across any difference, just like I did as that shy, introverted girl learning body language cues and Bollywood dancing years ago. So I hope today you will be proud of everything you've done to get to this point. A few things that I want to leave you with. The first is I created a 4-page summary of all the best practices from my keynote today. If you go to this site, hybridtoolkit.com, it's available for free for all of you. Share it with your teams. It includes best practices in meetings, in digital communication, in hybrid water cooler moments. It also includes a 12-question checklist of best practices that you can use with your teams to make sure that you are building rituals to collaborate faster and further together in today's changing world. Last but not least, I also have an entire course on this subject. We have 50% off for all attendees here. It's a course to help your managers learn how to manage hybrid teams effectively. It's all on demand. There's best practices. You can use it for a team session or workshop, and Keynote 50 is the code for all of you to get 50% off as well. But as I close today, as we really start the week, I hope that you all will be proud of everything you've done to be in this room that has taken you to this moment as we think about what it looks like to be together towards tomorrow. I hope that throughout this week, you will regularly sit with people you don't know well. You will ask them what they're working on. You will forge new ties here within the Alliance to bring more women into this industry, to spark more ideas around how you can collaborate and share best practices. And last but not least, I hope that you will ask yourself, how will you continue to lead for all of those, counting on your wisdom, your creativity, and your heart. Thank you so much again. Enjoy the rest of this week.